Hi there. Financial fraud is a global problem. Almost about $12 billion are lost annually due to consumer fraud. And you can also have 5% of your global revenue, which is lost to fraud. So even though we have very sophisticated techniques like machine learning and deep learning, we have not yet cracked 100% the problem of fraud. So let us look into the limitations of these classical machine learning techniques. So in a classical machine learning technique, you can have a transaction which is then given to a machine learning model, which is then going to output a risk score. So this risk score will be then sometimes also used by a human reviewer to see if the transaction is fraudulent or not. Now, this approach has got two major issues. So first of all, this machine learning model is trained based on past historical data. So it is good if your transaction follows a fraud pattern which was already there in the past. Yes, it is going to predict correctly if the transaction is fraudulent or not. But if you have a completely new pattern of fraud, and this happens quite often, the fraudsters will try to find always new ways of doing fraud. In that case, your machine learning model is not going to work. Also, these machine learning models are trained on an infrequent basis. So a data scientist would train a model on a monthly or a 6 monthly basis. In that case, it is not always refreshed with the latest fraud patterns. Even human reviewer is leading to slow manual investigation, because what happens that once you have the risk score, the human reviewer who is going to manually collect all the information related to the transaction and then going to decide if the transaction is actually fraudulent or not. So let us now see on how you can use agentic AI to solve these problems. So in agentic AI, you can have different agents who are going to do different process steps. So you can have a detection agent, you can have an investigation agent, and a reasoning agent, and a decision agent. Now, this is helping to solve the problems of the classic machine learning. So, for example, the reasoning agent is going to detect that if the incoming transaction, is it following an old pattern or it is something new which has come in. If it determines that there is a new pattern which has come in that case, it is going to retrain a machine learning model on the fly and then apply it to predict the fraud. So you can see that it is not a very static approach. It is a dynamic approach where the agent is going to decide to use which model. It will also decide to see, do we need retraining, and it is going to do all these actions on the fly. So it is much of a dynamic process rather than a static traditional machine learning process. Also, you have agents who can also gather different information to develop the context on why the fraud has happened and what is happening. And this also helps to reduce some of the manual steps which are done by the human reviewers. So let us also look into the architecture. So the architecture relies on data sources, which could be transaction devices, APIs, and then all this goes into a feature store and a vector database. So feature store is for structured data, vector database is for unstructured data, and on top of that, you can also build a knowledge graph. So this is your knowledge layer, which helps you build a knowledge of how actually the fraud happens. And then this agent is going to read this knowledge layer, and then based on various models such as large language models, machine learning models, it is then going to do the complete fraud prediction to fraud review process. You can also optionally use some policy engine as well as retrieval augmented generation, and your agent is then going to give an output as well as an audit trail on a transaction which is fraudulent. So the key takeaway is that agentic AI helps you to go from prediction to autonomous action. So it is not just about, is this a fraud, but it is also about building a context of why this is a fraud. It also builds the context of, is this a new kind of pattern? If yes, should I retrain the model? So there's a lot of contextual information, a lot of reasoning which is happening behind the agentic process, which helps us to better understand why the fraud is happening and make sure that it doesn't happen in the future, and always improve our fraud prediction system. Of course, it is not going to solve the problem 100%, but it is a much better step, much better evolution from the classic machine learning process. So if you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, give your comment that how do you plan to use agentic AI for the fraud prediction? What kind of fraud are you seeing in your industry, and do you think agentic AI can help? So see you soon in the next video. In the meantime, keep learning and please do subscribe to the channel, and see you soon in the next video. Bye.